Hi, thanks for tuning in to our Practical Nerds weekly podcast. I'm Shub, and together with my partner and co host Patrick, we normally invest in founders in design, construction, renovation, and logistics technology. Many of our friends in the ecosystem wanted us to start a podcast on the built world, and in return, we decided to honor their request with a show about nothing at all. Hey Patrick, how are you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm still waiting for that new intro, Shub. Did we say we do that for an anniversary episode or something like that?
Exactly. Yeah, our
Okay.
2 year anniversary is coming up soon. I
Ooh,
think we can make it a nice homage to Practical Nerds finally getting there.
okay. And then I'll need to think of that and do that. We'll do a remix.
A remix, you said.
A remix.
Obviously, an AI generated one, I'm guessing.
A remix. Now, not to make the episode about one of the most weird and quirky and idiosyncratic shows of all time, a show called Ancient Aliens, but
Oh,
I saw a picture of you standing in front of Chichen Itza last week. What
yeah.
happened?
Yeah, I mean, that was something I've wanted to do for a while. I think there's like a set of ancient sites I wanted to visit ever since I visited the Great Pyramid of Giza several years ago. Finally crossed Chichen Itza off that list. That was pretty cool.
As a native Indian, how many of the Indian, um, let's say, big sites and wonders have you visited? Are you more the foreign wonder visitor?
Unfortunately, I'm embarrassed to admit I haven't visited the Taj Mahal yet, right?
It's the same with everyone and their nation. It's always the
Yeah,
same.
and I think there's quite a few others as well, which are not maybe as well known, but also brilliant monuments. I have to admit I've visited surprisingly few in India, and I'm embarrassed to reveal that.
It's not too dissimilar for me with my birth country. I mean, I have visited Castle Neuschwanstein, which, in my opinion, is one of the true marvels of the wondrous world, of the
Hmm.
modern world. But for example, I've never been to the Oktoberfest. There it is, on the
Oh,
record. I have never been. So, it's.
I hear you, man. I've been here for a fair bit of time in Germany. I've never been there as well, and I find that
Yeah,
quite embarrassing to reveal to some of my friends as well.
yeah, maybe not so much after you went. So. Good.
Okay.
So that's the friendly intro banter. I don't know how
Hmm.
we segue from here into Coca-Cola and cloud manufacturing
Yeah.
for construction.
So, actually, we obviously, because we are obviously VC 101, Patrick, we come up with our own set of jargons, own set of terms, which are unique to fundamental and practical nerds. And one thing or one phrase we've used fairly often in several of our episodes is cloud manufacturing. So we've had more and more people around us asking, hey, what exactly is cloud manufacturing,
That
right?
is when I spray some silver iodide into the air and I produce clouds. Is that what it is?
Correct. So whenever you want to manufacture, whenever you want, to invite rain upon your manufacturing facility, that's what you do.
Okay, that's not what it is. So what is it?
Yes. So, actually, I want to hold off on answering that question.
Oh,
But before that, I want to tease an illustration because, look, I can dive right into the explanation. I think it will perhaps sound again very jargony and very VC like without providing a real world example of a very well known company, right? Just to set the stage of what a newly imagined model and the future of that newly imagined model might look like, right?
hmm.
And, actually, in thinking about this episode, I was thinking, hey, what examples exist that everyone knows of for, let's say, cloud manufacturing minus one, or what I guess is still referred to as contract manufacturing. What are
And
some
they might
cool,
not even realize it.
they might not even realize it, right? So, you know what? Let me set this up. So, Patrick, when I talk about Coca-Cola, right? And for reference, when I say Coca-Cola, I'm referring to the drink, the cola, the soda drink Coca-Cola. Do you think of it as a B2C company or a B2B company?
Oh, I would think of it as a B2C company just out of first impulse, and I would
Hmm.
bet that everybody, not everybody, but many people that are not part of Coca-Cola would think the same way.
Yeah. You know what? Until about a year or so ago, that's what I thought as well. And I
Hmm.
think I wouldn't blame anyone who thought that same thing. You know, the incredible thing is Coca-Cola, especially Coca-Cola, the drink Coca-Cola, it is completely a B2B company, believe it or not,
Hmm. Wow.
right? So all the stuff that you buy from retailers, from any stores, etc., it is actually not sold. What you're doing is not buying stuff that has been produced or sold by Coca-Cola, believe it or not, right?
Huh.
So let me break it down what this model actually means. So
Okay.
when you let's say you walk into a store and buy a bottle of Coca-Cola, that bottle, what you're buying is stuff that has been actually sold by a bottler of Coca-Cola. Yeah, it's not Coca-Cola the company, but a bottler of Coca-Cola. So maybe
Hmm.
let's pause here and let me explain what specifically this means. So what Coca-Cola actually provides to its bottlers are, today it's called concentrate. Previously it used to be called syrup. So think of it like a small quantity of, I guess, their secret recipe formula, right? Previously they also used to add premixed sugar and water. These and that used to be called syrup. Now they've actually even decided to remove sugar and water, probably to save costs, etc. And they just sell what is called as concentrate, right? So that's
Hmm.
actually what the Coca-Cola company produces for the drink Coca-Cola.
Which probably
What happens?
includes the well, whatever ingredients of the secret recipe that Coca-Cola keeps close to its chest.
Exactly, right?
Okay.
Then what happens is it sells this product to what are known as bottlers, right?
Hmm.
And the bottlers are actually the one who go ahead and invest fairly significant amounts in capital facilities. So this would be where they take the concentrate that they receive from the Coca-Cola company. They have to mix a certain amount of sugar, add water, so that's the raw material expense. They have to have the facilities that actually prepare the glass or plastic bottles that we see when we buy these beverages, and they have to mix it up, make a recipe, and fill it up, and they are responsible for transporting the finished products to retailers, restaurants, etc. So they do all of this,
Wow.
Patrick. So that's not done by the Coca-Cola company; it's done by the bottlers, right?
I had no idea.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, so for the sake of simplicity, we'll stick to retail stores. I mean, if you're interested, there's also a more evolved model of what happens if you buy Coca-Cola from the fountains in restaurants, right? That's also an interesting take, right? But if I'm not mistaken, that's maybe less than a third of the sales. Most of the sales comes from the bottled drinks, not the fountains. So typically what would happen is this bottle is then sold by the bottlers to retailers, restaurants, fast food chains, etc., who then obviously go
Hmm.
ahead and sell to customers.
Hmm.
Typically the Coca-Cola company would make, I think if I remember, something like 20 to 23% of the sale price. As in, it's not a royalty business, but that's the equivalent of what they end up making. So, for example, if you buy a bottle of Coke for, actually, I have no idea what it costs now, but let's say would it be like $1 or $2 maybe? So let's say it's that much. Is it? Okay,
Depends also on the country. Depends on the country.
that is true. So let's say you were buying it for $1, Coca-Cola will probably make 20 to 25 cents on it. And the
Hmm.
rest is what the supplier or the bottler in this case works with, in which obviously they have to make do with all their capital expenditure, logistics costs, all of that stuff,
Hmm.
right? Now, the interesting thing you may be wondering, hey, hang on, but I see a ton of ads by Coca-Cola, right? So why are they doing all this if I'm not buying? So the cool thing is Coca-Cola actually does the ads so that the revenue of their bottlers goes up. So
Hmm.
that you buy more and more from retailers who then buy more from the bottlers, and therefore the bottlers will then go ahead and buy the concentrate from Coca-Cola. So it's
That's
actually a,
that's of course holding the intangible value of the brand Coca-Cola, which I'm not sure if it's true anymore, but for a long time it has been has been valued as the most valuable brand in the world. Maybe that's still the case.
possibly, yeah. So the interesting thing is, although many of us, when we think of Coca-Cola, we think of it as this tangible product, probably a traditional company, tons of manufacturing facilities, perhaps, right, having to move stuff around, right? It's often described as, in many countries, Coca-Cola is more readily available than drinking water, for example, right? That's often used to elaborate just how well distributed the product is. The insane thing is none of that is done by the Coca-Cola company itself,
Wow.
right? That's pretty incredible. And it's actually a surprisingly asset-light model leveraging the capital expenditure done by others. Now, when you're hearing this, you may be wondering, hey, why are the bottlers okay with taking up the capital expenditure if this is the deal? They do this because they're very confident that because the marketing spend is taken by Coca-Cola and it's a strong brand, it's a very liquid product. So it's a very assured revenue stream, assured return on investment for them. And that's sort of the symbiotic relationship here.
Interesting. You know, sorry, we didn't discuss that in the pre-brief, but actually now that you mentioned it that way, you can think of burger chains
Yep.
in a very similar way. I mean, there's only very, very few locations where the, let's say, parent company, etc., would actually still own the
That's right.
location, and the vast majority would be franchisees.
Mhm.
Again, we'll have to find a mix of equity and debt.
Yes.
The location would still oftentimes be sourced and developed by the mother company because there is a very strong real estate component to that kind of a business. But hey, the burger flipping happens by the franchisee, the cloud manufacturer, if you want. Now, the supply of ingredients, where does that come from? Exactly, the mother company.
Correct. That's right. I think, I mean, again, this information might be dated, but from what I recall, having read this a few years ago, in a McDonald's franchisee, for example, a typical store, the only product actually supplied exclusively by McDonald's would be the burger patties. And everything else would be more sort of wholesale deals brokered by McDonald's.
Exactly.
Right, where the franchisee benefits from discounted rates, which, by the way, also applies obviously to Coca-Cola, etc.
But also quality assurance, standardization, making sure that the ingredients are conform to what you want as a product. It's fascinating when you phrase it that way, Shub. I usually, you had this provocative question, hey, is that a B2C company to you? Is it a B2B company? I mean, the same question you can then, in a different way, when you think of a burger joint under a franchise business, you're typically thinking of it as a sales point, but you never think of it as the manufacturing point or the factory. But in fact, it's both.
Yes, that's a great way. I hadn't thought of it that way. You're right. Actually, the quick service restaurant is perhaps a manufacturing center.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
it is. The other analogy where this doesn't quite hold true is, so when you look into the aggregate cement and concrete supply chain, sorry, if you're not from, let's say, familiar with that part of the world, concrete and cement are not the same thing.
Yes.
Concrete is the mix of cement, which is the binding material, water, as well as rocks, the aggregates, and sometimes you can throw some chemical additives into it. So concrete is the finished product that you see in the building, cement is the binder. And so the cement companies oftentimes would tell you, hey, our concrete plants, either our own or our customers who run independent plants, they are our gas stations. The way for a Shell or a BP, the gas station would be the distributor, but the purchaser as well as the distributor of the refined product. Now, where this breaks, or let's say where the metaphor stops, is that cement and concrete, there are exceptions. For example, in high performance applications, etc., for the vast majority wouldn't be as strongly branded products, and like there is no taste component to it the way there is to whatever, a burger or a soft drink. So that's where the metaphor ends a little bit, but still the cloud manufacturing aspect can be ingrained even in that product.
Absolutely. And I think when I think about it this way, and mind you, there's more examples. Although, again, when you think of manufacturing, it's surprising to me how the vast majority of market observers, including VCs, including founders and others, the moment you say manufacturing, the assumption is, hey, very traditional business, very asset heavy. It's not a venture backable business and so on. Although, interestingly, the evidence is all around us of how there's been innovations around the asset heaviness or lack thereof of manufacturing, and what we think of as being a manufacturing business is actually more of a brand business or an IP business or just a sales method, if you will. That's the innovation, and how very large, very valuable companies have been created this way. So I think for me, at least, the first takeaway is not for if you're a founder building in this space, or if you're a market observer, firstly, be open to the idea that manufacturing has evolved beyond the traditional, or has been evolving beyond the traditional notion of what manufacturing entails for quite a while now, and to spectacular success. And we are now perhaps seeing the evolution of this model further, which is what you and I often describe as cloud manufacturing.
Right. Before you deep dive into what the cloud manufacturing means in the construction tech sense with the examples, I want to point out one important thing so that it doesn't get lost in the first part of what you're explaining about Coca-Cola. So you said something, Shub. You said, hey, the bottlers, the cloud factories,
Yes.
are okay with giving that amount of revenue share to Coca-Cola because they can trust that through the brand, through the economies of scope, it gets distributed and the sale will be effective. On the factory level, so there's an implication here to the factory level. On the factory level, that means that they trust that in this relationship they can utilize their factory. So basically, they will run at a very high utilization, if not at capacity, because in that part of the business model, if you run a low utilization, then you will suffer, especially if you do it over a long period of time. CapEx costs, and overhead, etc. You will not be able to earn your money on that. That's important in cloud manufacturing too. The relation, or not the relationship, but the dynamic of utilization of factories is actually a key enabler to the cloud manufacturing concept. So we'll come back to that. I just wanted to make sure it doesn't get lost in the metaphor.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head. I think this is, one of the, admittedly not that many, but relatively few and important distinctions, or I should say evolutions, of how what the likes of, say, Coca-Cola or McDonald's have done with a contract manufacturing model. What sorts of few tweaks here and there represent the changes in a cloud manufacturing model to take it maybe to the next level, to make it either even more asset light, or to squeeze that extra bit of utilization out of production facilities.
Yes.
Right. And I think what we've seen, and I think the examples exist both within our portfolio as well as outside. Firstly, there's very different kinds of relationships available. Not just because we laid out the Coca-Cola example or the McDonald's example, that doesn't mean all relationships have to be that way. The companies can continue to directly interact with the customers and use manufacturers at the back end, as in the manufacturers are not responsible for selling. We also have, in our portfolio as yet an unannounced company, very similar to the Coca-Cola situation, where you kind of offer like a concentrate and then the manufacturer runs with it to create the end product. So we are seeing examples of that as well. We are also seeing like a hybrid approach where you have manufacturers produce, but the manufacturers also act as customers, where because of the brand or the platform representing a source of let's say discounted rates or favorable access, you can also access production facilities through the access that the brand or platform provides at discounted rates, which allows you to increase your throughput as a manufacturer even further. So these are examples, and I think there's quite a few more, by the way, but just in the interest of time, we're seeing various iterations of what cloud manufacturing, what kind of forms it can take, right? Look, so just to dive right into some of the evolutions we have seen, the classic contract manufacturing model by itself has several advantages, although one may argue it doesn't, let's say, fully incorporate the benefits of, let's say, an internet model or a shared economy model, which allows you to sort of tactically change what is produced by whom, depending on which order is served. A lot of it is because at the time let's say the traditional contract manufacturing model was conceptualized, there was not that much level of data or sophistication available to figure out, hey, you know what, if an order comes in so-and-so location or at so-and-so price, it may be more cost-effective for someone else to produce for it. So it would be a more traditional way of either saying, hey, this manufacturer takes the whole region, or it's more like first come, first serve, and we'll deal with it. So what we're seeing now is, if you incorporate some aspects of what, for example, are adopted by best-in-class marketplaces of demand and supply matching. If you, for example, can say, hey, based on the fulfillment capabilities of those manufacturers, you match demand and supply to a way where not only are you maximizing asset utilization, as in perfectly matching the demand supply curve, so that I think I like the term you use in this context, Patrick, called load balancing. So you always ensure that whoever has the output available for when that demand comes at the right price, you match to that specific supplier, and not to like a whoever is sort of in first in queue or whatever. You match it based on what makes sense for the order, which is why a marketplace sort of infrastructure supports this sort of matchmaking internally from within the cloud manufacturer. I think that's one powerful benefit we have seen. Another powerful benefit we have seen, which is again, it's an example within our portfolio. If you actually maintain this sort of data, especially if you have a contract manufacturer with say 2, 3 or more product categories, sometimes the same raw material can be used in the production of more than one product or product category. And quite often, so you can not only match demand and supply when supplying to the end customer, you can also match demand and supply at the raw material end. The same raw material, for example, could be that is used in a paint product or an adhesives product could also be used in manufacturing a chemical product, for example, right? Or you could, a very similar sort of product could also go on as a laminate on wood, right? How do you decide what is the best use of a raw material at that point? In a traditional contract manufacturing model, it's a very linear sort of mapping of who supplies what to whom, whereas you can make these tactical real-time mappings and matchmaking depending on what makes sense in terms of asset utilization and price realization.
Interesting. Tell me something. So I want to share an anecdote here as we're diving into the cloud manufacturing nuances a little bit. So I had a chat with a person, an investor that has been investing in marketplaces maybe 7 or 8 years. So in our world, that would count for long experience.
A fair bit, yeah.
And worked for a fund that actually focuses on marketplaces only.
Okay.
So that person at some point in time, this is a while ago, at some point in time, we were discussing this. I was explaining a few of our firms that could be interesting for them. I said, this is a cloud manufacturer. He said, hold on. I've never heard this term cloud manufacturer. What do you mean? And that was on me. I was basically using jargon. But I also could not have used the jargon that he was familiar with, because had I said managed marketplace, it would actually have given him the wrong impression, because it's not.
Yeah.
That's what happened next. So the guy then says, okay, so you mean a managed marketplace? I said, no, not a managed marketplace. One of the key differences to a managed marketplace, Shub, is that in a managed marketplace, the traditional didactic will be, and philosophy will be, to create liquidity on the supply side. So you will typically say and believe in things that, hey, I need to add more and more suppliers because that creates competition, that creates the ability to route orders better. It allows me on the demand side to do more things, perhaps geographically, perhaps new categories, etc. And then you will very quickly in these models try to have thousands of suppliers, literally, even in construction tech managed marketplaces. Whereas in a cloud manufacturer, you're doing the exact opposite. You're actually trying to concentrate suppliers, not to n equals 1, but you're trying to concentrate them in a way where you can guarantee, back to our earlier point, utilization. In a and the result of that is, in a managed marketplace, you do not assume the risk of utilization. A managed marketplace does not do that. The supplier still holds the risk of utilization. In a cloud manufacturing model, the cloud manufacturer assumes the risk of utilization, and in exchange, they get amazing terms.
Yes. Yeah, I think I couldn't say it better myself. I mean, so we've backed both managed marketplaces as well as cloud manufacturing platforms. And I think we have seen firms evolve from managed marketplaces to cloud manufacturers. So that is definitely possible. So there is, I wouldn't say it's a very wide spectrum, but there is a bit of a spectrum of overlap, or at least evolution between the two. But I think the crucial difference is a cloud manufacturer is someone where, as a customer, that one platform is the be-all, end-all, and you're not expected to interact or liaise with any other third party. Now, depending on the product or the service, that may also be true for a managed marketplace. But the difference is in a cloud manufacturer, even the end product, the brand or the supplier or the manufacturer is also the platform.
Right.
So, for example, when you buy a bottle of Coke, you don't buy, or you believe you're not buying from ABC bottler, right? You're buying from Coke. So that's the
Yeah.
analogy here, right?
Yeah.
Does that make Coke a managed marketplace? In my opinion, no, because you have not made the decision to buy by deciding, hey, where's the best price? Where's the best deal? And I'll evaluate 5 bottlers and pick the best deal out of those 5 bottlers. You have
Right.
decided that you like Coke as a platform, and therefore you'll buy what Coke is giving. That's the difference.
Right.
So your faith is not necessarily, it's not an exact statement, but at a high level, your faith is more in the platform that you have chosen, and you buy that platform's brand rather than the end product that the platform is enabling.
Right. So cloud manufacturers should, what are examples, let's say, doesn't have, in our portfolio, we have a few, so I think it's okay if we mention them today, but let's not do advertising. Let's just point out the examples, and perhaps outside of our portfolio, so that people can research, and maybe you can explain 1, 2, or 3 of them so that it becomes, let's say, tangible.
Yeah, I think that, look, the most notable one from our portfolio doing this at scale is Inframarket. We have a few others in the portfolio. I think perhaps haven't yet deserved the scale, doing cloud manufacturing to be touted as being credible examples. Let me pause and think of examples of companies having executed this. Actually, you know what? I feel like I'm trying to recall the name here. I'm recalling the categories, but not the names of the specific companies. I think they're new age D2C brands in, for example, cosmetics, beauty, functional beverages, etc., which actually do incorporate the cloud manufacturing model. I must admit, the name is failing me.
Are you thinking of the roll-up companies that did that, or the original, the ones that were to be rolled up?
Yes, and companies that basically are brands. So for example, some of the okay, this is embarrassing. I'm not able to come up with the
D2C
name
is
right
not
now.
my category. I cannot help you. Sorry.
Yeah, so I'm thinking of, for example, some new age sneaker brands which incorporate the cloud manufacturing model, etc.
Yeah.
Interestingly, if you think of construction products, and we had done a episode, I think 6-8 months ago on this, on the power of brands in building materials. I think we're kind of at the start of what this actually means if we restrict our discussion to cloud manufacturing for building material brands. We're seeing some examples of that even in Europe, obviously, as you have led such an opportunity for us. I think there's actually way more opportunity, but ironically and maybe counterintuitively, I think the biggest bottleneck is not the opportunity itself. The biggest bottleneck is the bias or stereotype against anything called manufacturing, and the perception that it's boring, asset heavy, too traditional, etc.
Yeah, on the capital and talent side, that might be the case. I think on the customer side, absolutely not the case. I think on the customer side, this is actually what they are familiar with. And so if you, for them, manufacturing means, hey, quality, time, budget. It means reputation and trust and guaranteeing these deliveries and qualities and outcomes. And actually, I think that's where the cloud manufacturing model shines even more than a managed marketplace. So in a managed marketplace can be very operationally involved. It can be very execution intensive. But eventually, in very project-based B2B industries, there could still be a stereotype of customers that you can encounter in the market against managed marketplace, where they say, well, but still you're this digital company, it feels and smells like e-commerce, etc. And as a cloud manufacturer, that's not the impression you're giving typically. The impression you're giving is typically, hey, I'm a supplier. This is my brand, and I take all the risk. I call you by phone. Of course, I automate a lot on the back end, but the customer experience will typically be closer to a traditional supplier than it is closer to a digital marketplace. And that actually helps you. So what you say, I think for the capital side, and for the talent side, that could be the case. I think for the customers, the cloud manufacturing model typically feels more traditional and more obvious, but maybe less obvious to the talents. Yeah.
I see.
So I think that's one. Two, I had an interesting discussion the other day within our team. And we have been looking, Shub, over the years at vertical integrators in the metals supply chains. I think your investment journey there started with Z-Work. Obviously, that turned out to be a great success. And then Western markets, Western VCs, talents, founders, etc., they were perhaps also enthralled with that model and trying to build metals managed marketplaces, sometimes enabled by CNC farms and factories. And then we had American dynamism as a story and as a narrative. And then the next piece of that was, hey, defense build up, let's get manufacturing back on shore. And so that led to companies being pitched, again, sometimes around CNCs, sometimes not around CNCs. Hey, let's build up these factories. Let's automate CAD to CAM. And because I vertically integrate that, I should be more efficient and effective. I don't want to discuss that model. I have my opinion on that model as well and how it can work or not. But we've been looking recently at such a company again. And I've been talking to our team and I said, look, this founder in this specific case is pitching us, hey, you need to build up more supply because we don't have enough metal shops in the West. Metal shops don't scale. Everything was offshore to China. A very top-down way of arguing. But the point he made and sort of his insertion point into his own thesis was we need more supply. And I think that is absolutely categorically wrong as an insertion point. I think it's correct as an observation, but it's categorically wrong in my mind as an insertion point. If you want to build a successful cloud manufacturer, it's about you need to build utilization of existing supply first before you build new supply. And that is a non-obvious insight that not many founders will agree with me. Yeah. Because they are correct to point out our supply is constrained. Absolutely. Workforce is terrible. Yeah. We have offshored so much of the metal supply chain that we even struggle to build artillery shells in the West now. Absolutely correct observation. I'm not debating the observation. I'm saying the sequence and the insertion point with which you start to build a cloud manufacturer is not building supply. And that's very counterintuitive to people. The starting point is maximize utilization of existing assets, and then you have the right to build more supply.
I fully agree. Look, I mean, one key assumption, which we have mentioned over and over again, but I think we have not maybe called out the implication of it. When we say, again, going back to the Coca-Cola example, the bottler is producing the output by calling it Coca-Cola and not XYZ bottler drink. They're giving up their own rights to brand the drink, right? And that is true for any other category. Or say a franchisee store of McDonald's is giving up the right to call the store something else and not McDonald's. Or in the case of a building materials company, which is a big privilege they're giving up, right? So the counterfactual question that needs to be asked here is, what are they getting in return, or what do they want to get in return for giving up the privilege to call the brand by their own name, right? And the answer invariably is they want certainty of higher earnings or higher revenue, certainty. Not necessarily the peak, but the certainty and the regularity of it needs to be solved for. And that is what the cloud manufacturer needs to solve for. And if you have a wide and dispersed supply base to begin with, that is almost impossible to achieve in the beginning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if you then go after categories which are already at and that's your insertion point. And if you're going after categories that already have a high utilization, how do you prove that? You don't. And that's when founders then say, well, let me build my own supply and prove it. I categorically disagree with that. It's not consistent with our experience, how our cloud manufacturers have developed. And we have multiple ones in multiple hundreds of millions, Inframarket's case, billions, that, to us, our experience and our taste has been shaped by that.
Yeah.
I believe what you should do if you're building this in the West is find categories which are underutilized, underbranded, underdiscovered, and give them a capacity guarantee, a utilization guarantee to buy their capacity, and then you earn the right, also all the learnings, etc., to then actually build up new supply.
I actually, why only the West? I think that applies all over the world. The same
Yeah.
principles. So the question often is, so the decision therefore comes down to which category of products do those set of conditions apply to. That will basically dictate what kinds of businesses you can set up with a cloud manufacturing business.
Yes. Good. This was a good discussion.
Indeed. So I think the next time someone asks us, hey, what is cloud manufacturing? I think we'll send them this episode.
Yeah, it's a managed marketplace, just not. So in a nutshell, yeah.
Very
good.
nice.
And sorry, I think we might have omitted some of the examples. So Infomarket was one. Metalbook would be another example of that. Zwork, Shub, would that qualify as an example?
To a certain extent. To a certain extent.
Okay. Yeah, so there are a few examples here that you can research that are worth researching. Always happy to chat. Shub, I would say you're the OG of construction cloud manufacturing. So I guess people should reach out to you.
I would like to believe that I think, again, this is something we've said over and over again in Practical Nerds. I think even with cloud manufacturing, just like a new industrial revolution or whatever, I think we'll see some sort of renaissance in new age building material manufacturing or construction oriented manufacturing with new age models. And I'm quite excited about that. And I think it'll take localized forms across the world.
Actually, okay, now I can do just my own shout out here. I have identified a few underbranded, underutilized, and underdiscovered categories in Europe, and I think the same will be true for the US, but that's something I have to validate. But for Europe, I have validated it. And would be keen to speak to truly exceptional founders that want to get their hands dirty in an operationally intensive cloud manufacturing model. Always open.
Absolutely.
Always open for business.
Absolutely.
Cool. Thanks for sponsoring, sir.
Of course.
All right. Then I'll see you next time.
See you soon, sir.